I mean, I've been fascinated for years by artists, and I still am, that I actually don't like.
Fine to have you here.
Thank you.
I looked at your list of inspirations actually for I think your other project on your MySpace, and the first two names in the list were David Lynch and Louis Buñuel. Would you say maybe the atmosphere they capture in their films, is that also capturable by music, do you think?
Do I think the atmosphere in their movies is helped by the music in their films?
No, if maybe the atmosphere that they create that you
yes.
that you like, is that possible, do you think, to capture that just by music and sound?
I think so, yeah. I mean, obviously they're very different mediums, but music and film, but I think they have a strong connection. What I love about David Lynch and Louis Buñuel and generally surrealist cinema is they're not tied to conventional narrative structure. This is what I don't like about Hollywood movies, is that you kind of always know that there's going to be a very neat narrative. And surrealist cinema, and the great surrealist directors, of which I think those two are, always have a little twist just around the corner to keep you interested, to keep the journey moving along, but not in a predictable way. And I try to apply that principle to music. So Porcupine Tree's music they're not standard song structures. Very often they will go off at tangents. Very often they will play with different styles, sometimes within the same piece of music. So you'd have ambient music, death metal riffs, pop choruses. And I think a lot of that does come from my love of European cinema and the atmosphere of European cinema. It's always unexpected.
Have you always consciously tried to emulate that also in the music, or is that something that you discovered along the way, that you had the same?
It's not conscious in the sense that I'm not sort of, trying to contrive a kind of equivalent musically speaking, but I think generally if something is very, if you're passionate about something, if it means a lot to you, then naturally it tends to make its presence felt through your own work. I always think of music in visual terms anyway. Mm-hmm. Whenever I'm creating music, I'm always imagining visuals, and I'm always thinking about film projects and video projects, and some of them I do sort of take into that arena too. You know, my last solo album became a kind of full-length film as well. Mm-hmm. So for me, the combination of film and music is probably the one that interests me the most. I think film without music is definitely lesser.
Yeah. Maybe do you think that in your the previous record, Fear of a Blank Planet, you criticized a bit of the fast consuming way of. Do you think maybe in another way that maybe now that people tend to be less patient when it comes to art, maybe movies and music as well, that the way that you write to make the certain changes in styles, is that something that became quicker over the years, or do you think that you sort of?
I think when you're talking about anything that is not in a conventional sort of recognizable structure, whether it's surrealist cinema or a more kind of experimental form of rock music, as a listener you have to invest time in it. And unfortunately that's something that we have less and less of. Generally speaking, people nowadays, the pace of life is so much faster, we have less and less time, consequently we have less patience, and consequently we have less time to invest in getting what's special out of these things. Now, I've always been a great believer that the things that don't make sense the first time you hear or see them have got a lot more potential to be things that really will touch you and mean something in the long term. Mm-hmm. And the things that are very immediate, very often they don't have anything to offer you beyond that.
But do you mean like you would absolutely, there has to be something in it that you hear the first time, maybe already to play it a second time if you think it's rubbish?
Or a third, or a fourth, or a fifth, or a 10th, or a 100th time.
Can you give an example of a record that you had like to listen to 10 plus times?
Oh yeah, when I was a kid, the first time I heard Captain Beefheart, Trout Mask Replica, which is one of the most bizarre albums ever made. By anyone's standards, this is one of the most bizarre albums ever made. It's one of my favourite albums ever made. The first time I heard it, my reaction was basically, these guys are just having a laugh. It's just a laugh. They're just mucking about. They're just making it up as they go along. But there was something about it that made me go back. It piqued my curiosity. And I think that's the thing. But sometimes when you see or you hear something, it may not make sense to you the first time, but something about it piques your curiosity and makes you go back. And the second time it begins to reveal more of its kind of power and its emotion. And then the third, fourth, fifth, and then after that maybe it becomes your favourite thing, you know.
But is it maybe possible just by music, or also by maybe the way of thinking that they present also within the music and artwork, maybe that appeals to you also? Because
I think anything, I think it's very often the whole package, yeah. You can be fascinated by, I mean, I've been fascinated for years by artists, and I still am, that I actually don't like. But something about Bob Dylan being a great example. I don't like Bob Dylan, but I have incredible respect for him, and every few years I will go back to the catalogue and try again, because I know that there's something there I'm not getting. The whole image, the respect he has, you know, and all the kind of whole discography is fascinating to me. I've never quite got it, but one day I might.